Hey everybody, our friend David Vero has asked an AMA that I want to touch on. David says, can you review the data analysis thread on 17 lands data by the analytics team leader? And I have shared that link here with chat. And what I'm going to do is just read you this thread, and we'll try to make some sense of it and try to see what we can take away. One of my big questions about data, about analytics like this, is what can I learn from it that actually changes how I draft, changes how I prioritize things? And I'm not saying there is or isn't. I'm saying that's what I'm looking for. And, you know, sometimes you just get interesting info, but how actionable is the interesting info, right? So that's what I want to figure out here. We'll see what's interesting and then see what's actionable. So Carl, aka 2Duck Cubed, says, hey, Limited fans, this is a thread on wins above replacement, or WAR, as we call it in sports and stuff. The concept to value cards using Kaldheim draft data from 17 land. My name is Carl, or 2Duck Cubed. Right now I'm ranked #1 Limited on MTGA, and my day job is leading an analytics team. Please retweet, follow if you enjoy. The question we are trying to answer: how much does a card contribute to winning, both overall and versus other cards available at similar stages in a draft? To do this analysis, I'm leaning on just a few measures that can all be found on the card rating tab, 17lands.com/card_ratings. If you want to skip methodology, scroll down a few tweets to the charts. We'll do a few different versions. First one sets the table and is more fun than useful, showing what cards have created the most wins and which ones have destroyed the most wins. So how did we get there? First, I found and this is the part where it's am the type who knows just enough about statistics and whatnot to be dangerous to myself. And here we have an expert who's going to try to walk us through how to take raw data and put it into a form that's useful. So this is what Carl says. First, I found the weighted average win rate of 17 lands users, which is 54.1%. That's really important, because I remember one time we were talking about the win rate value of some card, and somebody said it was like 54% or something, and I thought that was kind of high, like, wow, it's 4% above average. But then we remembered, oh, this isn't every user. If we had the data of every single Magic Online or Magic the Gathering Arena user, it would average out to 50-50, right? Because, you know, somebody's got to win or lose every game. But the weighted average here, since only some portion of the player base is self-reporting to 17 lands, you have to look at how good that reporting player base is. So basically the average win rate of a card is 54.1%, because that's the average win rate, the weighted average win rate of the data of the players of the data that is coming from. So so then Carl says, then I needed to decide which win rate to evaluate a card against. And this is where I decided on an average of the deck's win percentage, game played win rate, and win percentage in games the card is drawn, game in hand win rate. So comparing just how much does the deck win that has the card, and how much does the deck win when it has the card in hand. While we are drafting decks and not cards, games in hand helps reduce correlation noise by identifying cards that contribute more to a deck's win percentage versus simply what cards end up in good decks. But you also can't ignore the deck win rate, because a good card in a bad deck doesn't lead to trophies. I also like this because on average you draw about half of your deck in a game, so taking into account half of the bump in win rate you get when the card is drawn felt like a good way to identify value. Let's call this drafted win percentage, or DW%. Does that make sense? It's a little tough to track there, but this is where you can also just trust the data analyst to come up with a good formula. This is where, like, I had access to this data. I saw the full data. I did have access to all of this data at Wizards, but I was not enough of a data analyst to like put it together in a useful way like this. So I never bothered, and it's why I avoided kind of bringing up this data even on my own stream because I didn't know exactly how to present it and do it. So I'm glad Carl here is taking the data we do have and putting an expert's eye on it. So Carl says, now we have average win percent equals the weighted average win rate of 17 land users. Okay, so that's where the average win percent is. The drafted win percent is the games played win percent plus the games in hand win rate divided by 2. So averaging the games played win rate and the games in hand win rate to get the drafted win percent. And then wins created equals the drafted win percent minus the average win percent times the number of games played. So this is how Carl is trying to get to a place where we learn how an individual card is affecting overall wins and losses. Yes, Carl claims I don't know anything about Carl, but I'm going to take Carl at their word that their day job is leading an analytics team. So Carl says, so will you show us the results already? Like I said, more interesting than useful. We'll get to useful soon, but these are cards doing the most work in good decks. Sarulf's Packmate is Scottie Pippen. Not the best card in your deck, but it does a bit of everything and just wins. For those of you who aren't NBA fans, Scottie Pippen was the second best player on Michael Jordan's infamous and dynastic Chicago Bulls team. Anyway, so if we look at, so this is where maybe I should go to left monitor now because we're looking at numbers and stuff. So I'll do that. Let's pop this open, pop this up like this, reduce that a little bit. Then maybe even go like this. Oh, no. I want you to be able to see what I'm seeing here, or it's less useful. And we can try and talk about it even, like you do. So here's this. What he's saying about these cards, when you do this wins above replacement, or wins created, wins destroyed. This is some interesting stuff. No huge surprises here. So the top 13: Packmate, Demon Bolt, Lindworm, Basalt Ravager, Squash, Spirit of the Alderguard, Frostbite, Clarion Spirit, Chariot, Path to the World Tree, Battlefield Raptor, Story Seeker, Mass Vandal. Now, this does not adjust for rarity. So when you see uncommons and even rares here, they have to destroy a lot more. They have to create a lot more wins to make this list because they're not showing up as much, right? Yeah, Behold is not in the top 13. But it also comes to color preferences. There's a lot. Well, let's let Carl break down this data a little more. Wins created continued. You see a mix of top commons, but also premium uncommons, and even a rare Cat Car that's so far above the curve that it makes the list with a fraction of the games played. One of the, in my opinion, more underrated cards in Story Seeker sneaks on too. Okay, now for the clickbait total wins destroyed chart. Much of mopey blue and black cards, I have a strong belief that a lot of these win rates suffer from misuse in unfocused decks. Many can be used effectively, but they just aren't in the average deck. And this is where I'm saying this data can be very difficult to use. Take a look at that point. I mean, and I've said this before, I mean, we know that, there are, Jarl the Forsaken, King of the Winds Destroyed, right? Does that mean Jarl of the Forsaken is unplayable? No, it just means that it is commonly misplayed and probably underpowered, right? It's probably not that great to begin with and easy to misuse. A combo that is tough, but also you get into color strength as well. So really what these two charts are showing us is that green-red is a good place to be, and black-blue as a starting point, maybe not the best place to be, or at least not this kind of black-blue, right? But also, Carl acknowledges that this is more clickbaity anyway. He says the useful stuff is coming. So let's continue to take the experts' words literally and move on. Yeah, here we go. But how can this help me? Yes, Carl, how does this help me? Here's where we really start isolating using data to tune your decision instincts in a draft. Magic is the greatest game in the world. Every pick is one decision with hundreds of factors at play, and no two picks are ever the same. aggregated data can't tell the whole story, but it can help verify your instincts or isolate potential mistakes. So that's what he's saying this is trying to do for us: verify our instincts or isolate where we might be making mistakes. And to do that, I want to know how many wins picking a card generates. Wins per pick simply takes the previous wins created and divides by total number picked. So this is going to average for rarity, basically, and start to put the top rares and mythics up where they belong. Very important, we are not dividing by games played. This is critical because it helps isolate safe picks versus more speculative higher upside picks while still capturing the downside when the card doesn't make your deck. We'll show in practice next tweet. You can see this in the chart as games per pick. More games played equals more chance to create wins. This is essentially a proxy for how often a card is played. As you can see, Starnheim, Asikas, and Koma are in a league of their own, way ahead of the pack. So yeah, they're crushing it by orders of magnitude: 64%, 64, 65, and then the next one down is 60.3% in terms of this percentage, and then the wins per pick similarly off the charts in that direction. First uncommon on this whole list, only uncommon on the list, is the Basalt Ravager. Looks like an honorable mention, right? Or am I missing it? These are all rares, right? Yep, rares and mythics crush this list, as you would expect, especially from a princely format, as it has been called out as. I call out a few honorable mentions at the bottom. Ravager is the top uncommon at 16. Runeforge is interesting because of the low games per pick, represents the risk you take of not finding a rune, but the upside is there when it is played. So that's what they're trying to do. Like Runeforge Champion, when played, does some good work, but you don't play it a lot of the time, so there's extra risk associated with that pick. I think that's an interesting point. If the first downside chart was mopey blue-black cards, this is really difficult to make work blue-black cards. Again, this one isn't super useful, but it's interesting. Honorable mention is Ravenform. I love it when data confirms expert opinion. So this is wins per pick. Technically, these picks harm your wins per pick, but again, that's on average. That's not, you might be able to figure out where to run these to make them work better, but on average, they underperform. I think the most interesting one on this list is, I just thought that was Narfi, but no, King's Narfi's Betrayal. That makes sense to me, actually. I thought Narfi himself was on the list and was saying, that's surprising. I think he would be quite towards more the winning side. So, okay, never mind. I thought there was a weird one, but it's not weird. This list makes total sense to me, really. Yeah, certainly confirms that the last time we used Tegrid's Shadow, I had it in my opening hand. I maneuvered it to get my Oppo for 2 creatures, and it still wasn't even that good. It was still just medium, and everything went as good as we could hope with it. And so it really showed that, like, even when it's doing its thing, it's still dependent on the quality of your opponent's creatures to even know if you get anything good out of it anyway. So yeah, it's a hard one to make work. Okay, now for the real payoff, says Carl. Can we estimate how much value a pick should create? First picks need to create more value. Late picks often don't need to make the deck. Let's hold them to different standards. Now, this is great. I love this. This is maybe one of the missing pieces of how to break down this data that I was missing, that I didn't quite suss out, of like, how do we really assess these, assess a card? And that's a fantastic point, that you need more value out of you need and expect more value out of your early picks than your late picks, so hold them to different standards. So then Carl says, if we know how much value a card should generate based on where it's taken, we can calculate a true value over replacement. In other words, on average, pick blah is worth blah. So he says, to do this, I plotted wins per pick versus average taken at. You can do this many ways, but I just fit a logarithmic regression, floored at 0 WPP. Yeah, see, this is where he's losing me a little bit. But I get it, like, in the sense that you're trying to compare wins versus where it's taken. It's a calculus there of how much it wins and where you're taking it on average. So now value over replacement pick, VORP, becomes the distance to the fitted line. The overall VORP leaders are kind of boring. See, I'm not sure how to read this. Like, what does this mean? Well, I'll let you dig in. I'm not going to sit here and study a chart. I'm going to keep reading through and you can go back and study it yourself. But anyway, VORP. The overall VORP leaders are kind of boring. The top rares are just much better than the other cards, so the list is very similar to wins per pick. The real value is in isolating pick ranges. So you can look at this list: Unleashed, Chariot, Coma again. So it's kind of the same stuff, but the VORP stuff is still pretty interesting. Farther away from dotted line, the better it is. Okay, got it. We've seen the bombs. Let's talk about cards with an average taken at between 2.5 and 5. So this is where he's isolating it to where the cards are taken on average. And that's super interesting to me. This is cool stuff. So let's talk about cards with an average taken at between 2.5 and 5. So the cards going 2nd through 5th pick on average. I call this the define your deck range. These are the cards that you should be thinking about early on. Fitting these into the right strategy will make your deck hum. This may be the most useful slide, the most useful image in this whole article, because this is helping you understand what to prioritize in those early picks. After the obvious, and sometimes even pick one. I mean, the reason these are average 2 to 5 is because often you're taking the stupidly good bomb, pack one, pick one, or whatever. But when you don't have spectacularly good early packs, these are going to help you. This is the type of list that's even going to help you in decks where you're in drafts where you're not taking these in that spot. Swamplore says Starnheim Unleashed as an average taken at above 1. That just seems like evidence that sometimes people make mistakes. I'm assuming they do not distinguish between pack 1 versus pack 3 in this situation. And if you're on the Pro Tour, you can actually absolutely define scenarios where you are correctly passing a Starnheim in pack 3, pick 1. You know, if you're just nowhere near it, if you're low to the ground, red-white aggro with no splashing tools, or sorry, black aggro, red-white aggro, you'd love it. But you know what I mean. So it is sometimes correct not to take that card, pick 1, right? But yeah, what was the and we have Sarulf's Packmate as the only common in here, right? Everything else is at least uncommon. That's very telling. Yep. But it kind of is your uncommon build-around zone, right? Look at that. It's just all these uncommon build-arounds. Now let's move to the heart of the draft, what I'll call the build your deck range. These cards do the work. Maybe pair a Path with that Spirit, or a Rootless U helps you find a Bomb, or Lindy. Pair Kaya's Onslaught with Run Amok, or maybe you just need Snowlands for your deck to work. So this is the your C+ type cards, right? Your C+, B- cards that are really filling out the meat of a deck. I'm letting you look at that rather than read them out. You can, of course, go to this thread yourself and look more closely. And finally, average taken at, I think this is really interesting. Finally, average taken at above 8, which I'll call the late value range. Let's tie a bow on it. This might be the most important one. Biggest takeaway, don't undervalue uncommon value lands. Run Amok still goes late. Story Seeker is a key in aggro mirrors. Sentinel does everything. Run Ashore used correctly swings games. So this is really interesting. Why I think this is interesting is look at wins needed. Wins needed. Remember, this is the column that says, based on where you're picking it, how many wins do you expect to gain out of that card? And that's great, because what this says is the wheel is gravy, right? When you pick up playables on the wheel that affect your win percentage positively, that's wonderful. And so here are these cards that narrowly bump your win percentage up, but you're getting them in slots where you don't expect any win percentage bump at all. So any win percentage bump you're getting on the wheel or later is effectively EV gravy, right? And so I think some of the biggest lessons to take from this thread are what are the cards that you're really building your deck around early in the draft, but after the obvious bomb phase. Obvious bomb removal, like first couple of picks, bombs and removal, pretty typical. You know, I don't love bread around here as an acronym, but yes, bombs and high quality removal continue to be priority early picks. This shows you what you should be looking at after that to really set your deck up for success, build around something. And then this one, the late value one, shows you what you should be trying to wheel, what you should be happy when you see coming around in your colors and be like, yes, people are still undervaluing this and I'm adding value to my deck and they're not, you know? So those are the two big panels, in my opinion, on how to help you actually improve your results with this. Now, what else do you say? There are a million ways to do this analysis, but I hope my approach was informative. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please follow and retweet, etc., etc., etc. So yes, very cool. Very still tough to, it can be tough to take actionable stuff away from this kind of thing because of that whole pesky part about how the data is affected by people misusing a card where you might correctly use it. So a lot of these lists are really showing not cards that cannot be played, but cards that if you are playing this, you better be able to explain why. You better be able to explain what this card's job is and why you ended up there, because it's on the list of heavily misplayed cards, right? So I wouldn't take these as, things like this list, or this other list of, this one, total wins destroyed. This is not a list of cards that cannot be played. This is a list of cards that if you're gonna play, you better have your reasons, right? So that's what's going on there. Oh, we got a raid from Court of Calls. That is very kind. Thank you, Alex. Good to see you all here. I was just about closing in on signing off myself, but the raid is very nice to see. I'm going to hop up here, though, and close off that AMA. Hopefully you found that link interesting and what that data analyst had to say about the 17 lands data to be interesting. I sure did. So thanks for that AMA. We're going to call that complete.